that going still? Go here. It's a video on agenda.
Okay, are we ready? Everybody? First of all, I didn't research or rehearse what I'm going to say here tonight because the last few weeks have been absolutely hectic, as my mother and Anne will testify. We were on for the last few days before we went to print. We just kept begging for an extra few days, an extra day, and then we were begging for hours. And on the last day that before the book went to print, myself and the designer sat beside each other literally for 23 straight hours. We had a break for a cup of tea and a load of sugary biscuits, but we did 23 hours side by side, and throughout the middle of the night, that night, it was the most bizarre thing. There was no communication between us. We knew we had to have it in by 9 in the morning, and he would just say to me, page 17, column 2, top, I'd read whatever, and we were basically making sure we left nothing out, and we had a list of things, last minute things to check for. So that was a chaotic 23 hours. The day before there was about 20 hours. So that's the kind of time constraint I was under. In the end, Walsh's printer, no relation, in Walsh's colour printers in Tralee did a magnificent job. They turned the books around in the space of a week, believe it or not. Actually 8 days they turned them around. It's a massive book. It's 620 pages, which is double the size of volume 2 and almost double the size of volume 1, which itself was big. But it's the final story. It's the end of the trade for the St. Kevin project. It's the last 11 biographies, which is really eight biographies, because you have a family of 3 and a couple. But it's the last of the stories of the people who died on the St. Kevin. And it's initially what I started out to do. I don't know how I got into this or how it took over. My mind has been hijacked for the last 12 years and 3 months. And I do not say that facetiously, that is a fact. But I set out to tell the stories of these people, and the detail I got into, my mind is obsessive at the best of times, but I became obsessed with them in their own individual lives, and I almost feel like I've actually lived some of their lives. But I tracked on everything I could, and it just became a complete obsession, for want of a better word, but it was also a passion, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, even the hard times, and there were very hard times, especially coming to the end. It was very, very rough. But we got there, and today we're at the end of the trade. But something bizarre happened exactly 11 years ago. On the Friday the 5th of October 2012, a man who was no longer here, but whose name resonates with both Shan and Trace, got me into a vault where I got to see files that should never have been seen by anybody. And from that I found a way to get more of those files, and on my own bat, and more files and more files. And then when I would show them to certain people who I would trust within the business, they would say, well, I know somebody has more. And that file process became a staggering 1,064 pages, many of which are printed in here to save me from any litigation that may come at me from either the bodies that beat today that investigate air crashes. And basically, everything about the St. Kevin inquiry was a sham. It was an investigation that they needed to go a certain way, or the airline would be on the hook for, in those times, tens or hundreds of thousands of euros or pounds. As it was, they invoked the Warsaw Clause, the Warsaw 1929 Act, that if the airline were not held directly responsible, the maximum payout for any one death to all of the people who may claim was £2,997. Now that's detailed in its own chapter, how that figure was evaluated. But for that to happen, the investigators had to retrospectively, after the fact, put Jimmy Keohane off course. I know that sounds fantastical, but they did it. They didn't do a good job that someone could go back and undo it on them. And there's 215 pages in this book that completely annihilate the British government's inquiry into the St. Kevin crash. The inquiry was run by an Irishman, no surprise there, and he in turn was directed, but he was a puppet of an Irishman in Ireland, who was the lead crash investigator in Ireland. So basically, the Irish powers that be had carte blanche on how they wanted the investigation to go. And that commencement started right back in Kilnarvan, right at the coroner's court. It started, even though the coroner investigates cause of death and he's not an air crash investigator, Nicky Laker, who was the senior captain in Aer Lingus, who lost his life as a passenger on the St. Kevin, but we can almost say he was in the cockpit at the time of crisis. Nicky Laker's brother, a very clever man called Victor Laker, who was a chartered accountant and auditor down in London, was extraordinarily suspicious as to this route they had been flying. And at the coroner's court, the Monday after the crash, he started asking a lot of very, very serious questions. For instance, did the plane clip another mountain before it was out of control? Was the plane on fire? He started asking the most bizarre questions. So they had to shut him down. And they shut him down, and you see here, they sent the police out to arrest him for accuse him of a false theft accusation against Aer Lingus. So there was a lot of dirty tricks used and tactics used, but it was an semblance of the both governments, the British government more or less being passive about it and turning a blind eye to what the result was needed. And you must also remember that British Airways' predecessor was BA and BOAC, British European Airways and British Overseas Aircraft Corporation, and they owned 40% of Aer Lingus. So any potential of claims against them would be held 40% liable for. So they got the outcome they wanted at the inquiry, which was that point 7 said that the airplane was lost due to the captain committing gross misnavigational errors. That never happened. Then they went on in point number 11 to say that no person or parties could be held responsible for the crash. So they give it with one hand and take it away with the other. But basically, a senior Aer Lingus captain and a war hero who had valiantly fought, courageously fought in World War II, an Irishman, put his life on the line with the RAF, has been left in that plane to cover the true cause of the crash. Jimmy Keown was never inadvertently lost. He had actually gone out to sea, picked up the radio, the Nevin radio beacon, and for some reason that we will likely never know, turned back. I suspect he turned back because of horrendous icing. And Aer Lingus, all airlines had a very strict rule. If you get into icing and you're coming to cross the sea, do not cross the sea, because if it gets worse, you know where to go. So that is what I suspect, because the chances of 2 or 3 things happening simultaneously are minute. But when they turned back, they encountered horrendous tailwinds. And something went wrong, and we would, unless there's minute investigations or retrospective exhumation of the plane, we will never know what that was. But something caused them to turn back, and thanks to Gwynant Roberts here and a lot of other people, I have been going around interviewing people from 2011, and the stories that the people were telling me did not match what the inquiry had arrived at. In fact, they completely and diametrically opposed each other. So this troubled me. But thanks to Shan and Trace's man, I got to see these documents, and they completely shredded what the inquiry had said. 20 people had witnessed it, and none of them were brought to the inquiry. In fact, they were all suppressed. One of them was turned back at a train station when he got as far as Houston. So a lot of skullduggery and what have you was committed for the airline to get the outcome that they wanted. And once they got the outcome, the cases of litigation did commence, but only families with 3 children or more got the full £3,000, and you had to sue in the court, and they fought you in court to get that compensation. But the argument that I present in the book, in the first section of the book, is that had the case gone against Aer Lingus, they could well have gone out of business. They had been losing hundreds of thousands of pounds per annum. That's back in 1940s money, all the way through to 1952. And this case, had it gone against them, I have no doubt would have sank them. And people that might find that preposterous, how could a national airline go out of business over an accident? Well, it happened to much bigger parties since then, like ValueJet, Pan Am and TWA. They were all in financial difficulties. Anytime any of them had a crash, they were gone within a year or 2. So the argument I present is that Aer Lingus would have been in horrendous financial trouble had the case not gone against them. They got the desired outcome. The cases proceeded into court. The families that did sue got the £3,000, and we still have Aer Lingus today, which is fantastic. And I need to get this across. We're very proud, as an Irish person, we're extremely proud of Aer Lingus. They have a 0 fatality since the jet age, since 1959. They're one of the safest airlines in the world, probably in the top 5 in terms of incidents. They've had no fatal accidents. So it is not the Aer Lingus of today that did this to the people of yesterday. It was the Aer Lingus of the day that did it. And all of them in the 215 pages of the deconstruction are named, and I have no fear in naming them. And more importantly, including the man who did it, the people who sent him out to do it are named. thanks to documents I got that clearly show who's to talk to who and who's not. And you will actually see documents in here where the police here in Wales listed all the witnesses, and you'll see another document where their names are literally removed. In other words, they're not to be brought to any of the inquiry phases. And a lot of skullduggery. And the end result is that, in my opinion, the airliner had to remain in the bog with the vast majority of the people in it to protect or cover the true cause of the crash. And that is pretty much the findings of the entire story. But I just never knew it take 12 years to get there. And that's pretty much what the book is about. It's the lives of the remaining passengers and Captain Cuhan, the detail of them, including your father, and the deconstruction of the inquiry. It starts with the financial woes of Aer Lingus and how they got into this horrendous financial mess by 1952. They were losing money hand over fist. And then there was a deal done with the pilots for them to get a pension that Aer Lingus would have to stop losing money. And part of that deal was, wink, wink, we fly the direct route. The direct route is the contentious route between Daventry. So instead of going north to Liverpool, Beacons every 30 miles, the Aer Lingus pilots were told to turn off at Daventry and go straight on a 149-mile stretch with no aids all the way to Nevin. Now anything can, you can come as far as Nevin, you could be 40, 50 miles either way. That's okay, that's only misnavigation. But where it becomes critical is if you get caught in a storm, and everything that night went against, not just Captain Cuhan, but the pilot behind him, Captain Wallace, almost crashed his ear on more than one occasion. So, that's the story of the final volume.
Hello.
Any questions after 12 years and 3 months?
Did the pilot's wife get a pension?
She got a one-off payment of £50.
What?
One-off.
£50?
One-off payment. I think it was actually 48. It was ever he was earning that month. She got that.
Wow.
In 1973, the newly elected president, who was 91 years of age today and 100% behind me, clearing Captain Cuhan's name, he got her a pension, an old age pension from Aer Lingus. He bartered it with the management, and they gave it to her. That was 20 years later. Yeah, 20 years later. There's something else I need to talk to you about. There's a man in this story called John Roberts. Again, I go back to Shamrock Tracing. Very special man. He was my number one. He was one of my best friends. I only knew John for 3 years, but he was a very good friend to me when I was here, and he got me into to see the first batch of these treasure trove of documents. But he pained at the fact that there was no memorial stone anywhere on planet Earth to these people. I mean, we know there's a tombstone in Cairnarvon where they list the names of, but there's nothing on it, just 10, 12 names.
No.
But he persecuted Aer Lingus for 8 or 9 years, and he finally got the headstone after Captain Cuhan's widow's ashes were interred in the bog. He got them through another method by somebody he invoked. But he got that headstone, and it is any of you were up there today, you've seen the lovely flat headstone.
Yeah.
He instigated, orchestrated, organised, and pushed for that for a decade. He finally got it in September '80, and it's all detailed here. And that is the only memorial to the victims, and there's nothing on it. He was not allowed to put down Aer Lingus, Shamrock, nothing, no victims' names. He was basically given a few words to play with, and that's the memorial stone that is there today. It was put up there 35 years ago, this month actually, yeah. So John Roberts, the book is dedicated to him, and he's also the unsung hero. And in the last 60 years, he's brought people up, any relatives that have gone. I don't know if he's brought any of you here, but he's brought several relatives up in my last 12 years. He's been very well in the first 3 or 4 years I knew him. He's brought people up once the story got reinstated from my behalf. So a great guy who deserves great recognition, John Roberts. Finally, people like Gwenant, who saw the plane in flames as a child, finally gets to tell what she witnessed, even though they were told what they saw they never saw. Do you want to speak, Gwenant? Well, Gwenant,
I'd just like to say that I had the job convincing you that the plane was on fire before it's.
That's because I am very almost paranoid about conspiracy theories, and I had to root to the very end to You are correct, I will not deny I did not believe you initially. And then when I interviewed your sister, her story was identical. And then when I got the statement, and then I got newspaper reports where pressmen were on the ground that night, and everyone was saying, I saw the plane go down in flames, and I saw a plane spurting out of it, including your neighbour William Williams. And then it became evident that several people saw and heard the plane in its dying moments. So what we do know is the plane did check Nevin. They always said that Captain Cohan, for some bizarre reason, told a lie. Why would he tell a lie unless he knows he's going to crash and he doesn't want the outcome? It makes no sense. So he checked Nevin, which is out on the Pukeli, what's that peninsula? Gwyn Peninsula. He checked there, and then he cleared the coast, and for some reason turned back. All the houses in Rue 2, am I saying it right? All vibrating. Everybody came out. What the hell is this? Everyone in the power station came out, and one of them in the power station was that clever. He counted the seconds and he worked out the speed of sound and his distance, and the plane did its loop, and then boom. The critical thing that I'm very happy to stand over here, and I just use basic trigonometry to do it, and we put it into a funny chapter, and it goes back to the people of Nant, and it's called the Land of the Giants, and it basically evidences that for any of them to have seen the plane impact in the bog, which is what Erlingus and the investigators claimed it did, they would have to have been 1,641 feet and so many inches tall. Because as any of you know today, you're up there, it's a bowl. And it's protected by the Winch E Rehan, the cog. There's this cog around it. So what the witnesses actually saw was the plane exploding mid-air. And because one of the witnesses, Lucy Williams, first cousin of William Owen Williams down in because of what she did not see, we were able to narrow that bandwidth down. And I believe I worked out the plane exploded approximately somewhere between 1,250 and 1,650 feet above the ground, above the top of the mountain. So the plane was going around in huge agonizing circles. Now, these three people here, David, Anwen, and Margaret, their parents both also witnessed the crash. But where we have the Erlingus, and I said Erlingus of 1952 perfectly nailed here, is that RTE, which was then Radio Éireann, sent over a Land Rover with a brand new recording, a portable recording device. They recorded their parents talking of the plane going around in two circles and then exploding, and that was immediately suppressed. But somebody in RTE gave it to me. And they went to charge of €360 to research it, and the person said, you've educated me so much, I never knew this plane crash, have it on the house. So I've given you guys copies of it, and you can clearly hear the newscaster saying, so what did you see, Mr. and Mrs. And he calls your father Bronwyn. But that's further evidence, and they were two key witnesses, but they did bring, the only witness that was brought to the inquiry that had any relevance for the inquiry, they brought a load of junk witnesses. That's space filling, gaslighting, but they brought your father because he was the first man at the scene, so him not being brought would have aroused suspicion. And the white-wigged barrister basically said to him, I put it to you, you blah 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 blah, and he put what Garanowi said he had seen and heard down to distortions in the wind, and Garanowi just whatever. So that's how they pulled it off, and you will also see in here 2 pages of where the assessors come to a conclusion, and the conclusion is reversed out. Now, why the powers that be didn't burn all those files is beyond me, but they didn't. Somebody kept them, different people kept them, and thankfully over the years, I guess it's because I'm so persistent, I hounded people. I eventually got all the files. There's only 2 files I didn't get, and I mention them and I speak of it and I say, Anna, I did not get these 2 files, but the evidence, and I'd like you to come back to me and tell me after you read the technical evidence in it, that the evidence it's overwhelming in my opinion. It's to the tune of about 97%, which meant that 97% of what they had told was hogwash.
Gavin, I'm really intrigued by what you revealed to me for the first time about the corporate ownership and investment.
Yeah.
The interest that was on this side of the water that BOAC and BEA.
BOAC had a 10% share in which they got rid of immediately after the crash.
Is that right?
BEA had a 30%.
And was that there from the founding?
No. What happened in April of 1946? Everything with the Atlantic was going. They knew the Atlantic was going to be a huge
post-war.
Immediate post-war. They knew the Atlantic was going to be a big business, and it's a bit complicated, but. Aer Lingus set up a sister company called Aer Linta, and this is a 4-page spread in this book. And they bought these 5 jumbo jets of the day, which were Constellations. And it became a very harrowing issue between the two parties. Fianna Fáil were in power, and Fine Gael's election manifesto in the next election was, if we get in, we're going to cancel this nonsense, this massive, it's going to cost the taxpayer millions. In the meantime, Fianna Fáil, knowing the election was coming, assumed that people would back them, and they rushed out and bought these 5 humongous planes. The British government at the time were in negotiation with Ireland because everybody wanted Shannon. If you topped the tanks at Shannon, you could get all the way to Newfoundland. So the British government did a deal with the Irish government that Aer Lingus would be the sole flyer in and out of the 26 counties. Okay? Aer Lingus, the Irish government would relinquish rights to all British, to BOAC, to fly in and out of Shannon to get to America. This was the part of the deal. Aer Lingus then would be guaranteed what I just told you, and Aer Lingus then threw in a caveat where they wanted Manchester, which they have to this day. Believe it or not, you can fly Aer Lingus from Manchester direct to America, and they're opening more routes by the month. But the Aer Lingus then asked for a routing out of Manchester to other cities in Europe, which they gave them as part of this deal. In return, and this is critical, not just the 40%, BOAC's chairman was on the board of Aer Lingus, and BEA's chairman was on the board of Aer Lingus, and BEA selected another one. So on the board of 7 of Aer Lingus, 3 were from British aviation officials. But this next part is the critical part. Lord Sholto Douglas was Churchill's right-hand man. He was the head of the RAF for all of World War II. You've heard of Sholto Douglas? He was the head of the RAF. He was chairman of BEA at the time of the crash and at the time of the inquiry. So basically, what I'm never going to say this because I have no proof, but you tell me Sholto Douglas couldn't have a guy turn back up the platform in Houston, a Welsh farmer coming down to speak Welsh and give evidence. He was sent back on the platform. So it was a complete cover-up, but they had the people in power to do it. And it didn't even take phone calls. It was just like almost telepathic. Wink, wink. We can't go down for this. And the important point to understand here is Sholto Douglas, the biggest player in British aviation at that time, was on the board of Aer Lingus at the time of the crash and at the time of the inquiry. Ironically, 11 months before the crash, he came to Aer Lingus, and this is detailed in here, and he pleaded with them to upgrade their aircraft because Aer Lingus were rapidly getting rid of the radio operators to save money, and he pleaded with them to take the device, which is called a G-fix, from the rear of the plane and put it in the cockpit. And he flew over in the world's first modified plane called a Pioneer, which is a DC-3 modified with a new cockpit. And Aer Lingus declined the offer. Had they had it that night, who knows? So it took a whole sequence of coincidences to go against them. But on the night of the crash, 6 chief people in Aer Lingus were over here before anyone from Britain was even known of the crash. An internal memo I have clearly shows that the British Ministry of Civil Aviation was told about the crash at 2:30 in the morning. They then got a patsy, and I have no problem calling a patsy. He was a patsy of theirs. They put a patsy on a train up from London, and he was assigned as the lead investigator into the crash. His name was John Duggan, an Irishman. And who collected him off the train station? Richard O'Sullivan from Dublin, who was Ireland's chief. And you can imagine the phone conversation in that car. We can't go down for this. I literally say it came down to those words. And from there, Richard O'Sullivan may as well have ran the entire crash investigation. Now, Richard O'Sullivan is a very illustrious character in Irish aviation. He was the guy who investigated Tusker Rock. 3 times as many people killed. 46 witness statements, all disappeared. 46. And he investigated that. He gave an interview a month shy of 88, and I quote this in the book. And he's asked, and he said, the guy says to him, will we ever get to the bottom of these crashes? And you can see he's a man way down with a conscience. He says, never is a long time. And then he said these words twice in a row. And you'll get it on the RT player. Things do turn up. Things do turn up. Well, right now today you saw what's turning up on the top of the bow. The plane is back giving itself up again. There's metal everywhere. Some of it is all here. This is, you'll have to help me with this then. What is that?
It's a cylinder.
A twin watt.
From a Pratt & Whitney twin was.
That's the cylinder out of the St. Kevin.
Oh my gosh.
And it's dead heavy. They're all coming up from the bog. Tracy, I think you explained why there was 3 super dry months.
Yeah, we had, for the last 2 years we've had long periods of really dry weather.
Yeah.
you know,
I was stunned today at the amount of
and then
metal.
lots of rain, then it rains, so it's kind of,
Yeah.
you know,
Regurgitating.
back up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's everywhere, the metal is everywhere on the bottom.
Yeah.
Big chunks like that.
Yeah.
John Roberts gave me a great gift way back in the year before John left us. And I really didn't want to take it on, but he said, you have such a passion for it, you have to have it. So this is a piece of it as well. And the verdant green is here, as you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's a lot of stuff inscribed on it here. So. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name's Anne Belton. Evelyn Belton, who was killed in the crash, was my aunt, 1952. I wasn't quite born at the time, but near enough. And again, I don't understand an awful lot of what you're talking about, and people's names I don't remember and all that. So my question is a very, very simple housekeeping question. The last time we were here, we visited, as you referred to it, the mass grave. That grave has the names of 10 people or 12 people, excuse me for being confused, on it. All I can think of is, if I was visiting that graveyard where my grandmother was buried, and you'd be passing by that grave and you'd see the names of the 12 people, I would say, I wonder why those 12 people are buried together. And my aunt is not in it. Well, I mean, excuse me, she's probably up the mountain, but we thought, and her mother thought, that she came home in the coffin, and we do have a burial at home in our cemetery. The first name on the thing is in loving memory of Evelyn Belton, killed in an Aer Lingus plane crash. So there's quite a lot of interest in our small parish because it was a horrendous happening in 1952. So a lot of the older people now will be very happy when we go back with our photographs and our news and all that. But if my Aunt Evelyn's name wasn't on our gravestone at home in Recline, and if it was on that gravestone there, I would be very upset that it doesn't say on it who were killed in an Aer Lingus plane crash in 1952. So if there's anybody here related to any of those people whose names are on that mass headstone, how do you feel about that? Do you want something written there, as in, you know, the names are there, and why is there not? I certainly would be more than willing to contribute to a fund to get inscribed on that who were killed in an Aer Lingus plane crash. I think it's a scandalous happening, that it's not acknowledged that that's why they were there. And we talked about it earlier, and we said, oh, people would probably presume, oh, it was either a mining accident or it was a seafaring accident, or God forbid, however the people died in groups here at the time.
Yes. From Carnarvon. Most people in Carnarvon think it's a military aircraft.
Military aircraft.
They don't know it's a civilian aircraft.
Well, I mean, I would be very, I'm not going to say to the fore because it isn't my business, but like I say, I think it's scandalous that it does not state either on that stone or on a supplementary stone beside it to say these people were killed in an Aer Lingus plane crash in January 1952.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Yes,
In our own case,
How do we do it then? How do we go about it then, Gavin?
Is that what you want to ask?
No, I was going to say, I have thought that each time I visited, twice I visited that mass grave, and twice I've thought, why would Aer Lingus be so adverse to the tribute at the top of the mountain, the copper plaque, or that gravestone saying, because in 10 years' time, a lot of the people who are relative to this story will be definitely gone. Let's face it. Why would Aer Lingus, and why would, like John Roberts did, and he showed us the way, why would people not write to Aer Lingus and say, we wish to have this testimony in print on the gravestone and at the top of the mountain?
Well, John Roberts.
The only thing about at the top of the mountain, we say it's us hardy chiselers that went up there and know the stone is there. Whereas lots of normal neighbourly people who live around visit their grave and they see that stone, and we'll always, please God, be seeing that stone, and they will always be saying, wonder why are all those people buried together?
Well, I just want to point out, John Roberts didn't get the stone on the mountain because it was persistent, and I don't take that away from his persistence was overwhelming. And I have every letter he sent to Aer Lingus because he was very OCD with his documents, and everyone they sent back to him. So if he was sending them a pleading letter, he got a copy made, he filed a copy, he sent one of them, they sent him back, he filed it. And he has any amount of these letters. He didn't get it from his persistence. He got it because on October the 10th, 1987, he brought the Cuhan family up, where Mrs. Cuhan, the widow of the captain, had died, and they brought her ashes up. And on the way down, something came up in conversation, and it turned out that Jimmy Cuhan and posthumously a son-in-law who became a senior captain in Aer Lingus, and he had a word with management, and then they caved in, and that's how the stone was given, and that's how it then happened so fast. But it was given on the proviso that there be no mention of Aer Lingus or the word crash or Shamrock or any victims' names. So you're back to your question again.
It's against their interest.
It's about money.
But it's if you see
In the case of Jim Nelson,
Yes.
But surely, again, back to my
his
point.
name is on a headstone in Dasnan with a
Yeah, yeah.
grave. And it just says who died in North Wales on the 10th of June. Now, I don't know because I don't know who did that.
But that would be your mom, in fairness.
I couldn't put her. I'm sure it would have been the Gaffney family, her in-laws.
Okay,
I
okay.
don't know if she was up to it.
Okay.
I mean, whenever that.
But that wouldn't have been your.
But it doesn't say anything about it crash and plane crash. Maybe it doesn't say plane crash. I don't think it does.
That's very,
But
very
surely it's an
clear.
inherent right to the relatives,
Yes.
and especially as tribute to those people who died on
Yes.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it be noted, that's how these people died.
They
They weren't killed in
Yeah.
a car crash or anything. In
But
any other method.
have you not seen the Tusker Rock documentary? It was on.
Yeah.
It was only on recently. There's a guy on it his brother was killed, Desmond something or other, and some bodies washed ashore in Wexford, but they buried them quietly
Yes.
and just said and he wants them dug up and to be DNA tested to see.
I think he got his way on one of them. I think he got a court order. There was one of them dug up recently.
Yeah, there was 4 or 5 bodies washed and they said, "Oh, just bury them quietly, don't send them."
But we were on the phone for the last couple of days and we were asking Mrs. Google when was the first Aer Lingus plane crash? Bladdy, Aer Lingus plane crash, blah. Tusker, 1968.
Ireland's #1 historian went on the Pat Kenny show 9 years ago and he said it was the first ever crash. No, but Ireland's #1 historian.
I was listening to it, and Gavin was a couple of years into this story, and I'm listening to it at home in Sligo, and he's in Shreveport,
What's his name
Louisiana. I can't remember the aviation historian's name
Yeah.
now because it's about
That's
9 years ago. And I immediately said, my God, what the hell is Gavin writing about? He said the first fatal air crash was 1952. And here's this aviation historian talking for about a half an hour to Pat Kenny about the first fatal crash in 1968. And I said, Gavin, are you sure you're writing the right story? Was it in Aer Lingus plane down? In an email. And we had a bit of banter over and back.
But wherever
I couldn't believe it. It was airwashed out of everything that guy said.
Airbrushed, as Michael Cuhan said. They airbrushed my uncle out of history.
Yeah.
But excuse me,
I mean, they've actually done that in the anniversary booklet. They actually produced.
Yeah.
There is not a single mention of.
But that's one of the, my mother bought me that book and that's one of the, I just have to say this, how I got into this St. Kenny. I was told about it as a child and it went into my mind and I researched it on and off. There was no internet, and when I was learning to fly myself, I mentioned it to a very well-known Sligo aviator called Jerry O'Hara, and they were from Sligo. You would know Jerry from Hanson's film. And Jerry O'Hara said to me, as cool as anything, he said, "Oh, that's John Cuhan in the shop, that's his brother." I said, no. He said, "It is." Now, none of us knew at that point that Jimmy Cuhan and the plane were still in the bog. I didn't know any of that at that point. And so I had a teething interest in it. And over time, I would often come in and I'd be looking up stuff. When the internet came, I'd Google it, and I now know this because I go back on backup drives and I see that I sit up at 6 in the morning drinking a 6-pack and wow, looking up Cuhan stuff like back as 1998 type stuff when the internet was just starting. But in 2002, on the 50th anniversary, I went into Cuhan's bookshop to the nephew of the captain, and he was a bit taken aback that I could know about this. Again, I did not suspect there was anything malevolent or malicious in the investigative process. And that rolled on, and then on the 28th of June, which was a Tuesday, 2011, my mother bought Aer Lingus doesn't time fly. My mother is the same age as Aer Lingus, May 1936, and they were selling this book on the flight, their 75th anniversary, and it was my mother's 75th birthday. So she buys me this book, and of course, to be nice, I'm there, all love, thanks. I had no interest in it. But I immediately went to the index, and St. Kevin, nothing, S-A-I-N-T Kevin, nothing, St. Phelim, yes, a full 2 pages. I thought, why would they not? So I went down to Cuhan's bookshop, to Michael Cuhan, and he said, "I've been waiting for you to come in," because he had the book on sale. "Look at this." I said, "That's what I meant to talk to you about. Airbrushed from history," he said. "It airbrushed my uncle and all these people from history, not a mention. And what are you going to do about it?" I said, "Well, nothing, quite frankly." And that was the end of it. And the next day I was in the library researching family history. And on the front cover of the Sligo Champion, 1952, January 19th, is her father. I said, "Fuck, what? Sligo man leads air crash mountain rescue." And I walked out of that library and I knew I was on a mission. 3:37 p.m.
Yes. Yeah.
Wednesday, June 29, 2011. That's 12 years, 3 months when my life has been taken over ever since. But this is the end result of it. And thankfully I got to meet her father, Christy McCran, and dynamite of a character. You can be very happy with him in this. And I credit him as the birth of the true inspiration of the birth of the St. Kevin Project. So that's how the story came about her father.
Excuse me.
I thought of you as a really great guy, and it was very respectful of you.
Oh, thank
And
you.
he thanks you for what you did.
Oh, brilliant. Thank him wherever it is, we're all destined for.
It's not there,
Getting back to what Anne was saying, is there a way through that graveyard? I haven't been to that graveyard where those 12 names are.
Yeah.
Can you get permission from the graveyard, without permission from anybody bloody else? We fund the headstone, and we do the headstone ourselves beside it.
I'm going to tell you
Can I
first.
just ask,
Yeah.
is there anybody here in this room who is related to the names of those persons on that tombstone?
I don't think there is, not yet. But I'd like to tell you something.
But that
about-
wouldn't stop us being interested
No.
in
Oh,
it.
no,
surely.
no.
What I'm about to tell you, might stop you doing it. That grave, when I started coming here first, that headstone was absolutely horrendous. It was in disrepair. You're going to love the story, and what I can tell you is fact. And I started, the one people who would not meet me on this process were former Aer Lingus pilots in their 90s. There was one guy who would talk to me on the phone, and he would start the phone call off by saying, because in Ireland, by the way, it's illegal to record a phone call without the person's permission. So it's completely inadmissible. If you want to say I murdered someone, if they didn't tell you in advance to record it, don't stand up for court. So I would ring this retired pilot from Aer Lingus, and I'm not going to give his name as he pleaded with me not to. And he started every conversation with, I do not give Gavin Walsh permission to record this call. And then he'd say, ask your questions. But he would never meet me in case I'd have a sneaky recorder. So he would tell me which pilots to interview, and he would tell me the company man, he won't meet you. But I got to meet one of the company men, and I won't say his name, but he's dead since. And I met him in his house, and he was very reluctant to meet me. And when I asked him any photographs, no, everything was no, or neutral. It was mostly neutral answers. And at one point he started to discuss another air crash. And I put correction on. I gave him all the right numbers, all his numbers were wrong. He was a bit taken aback. Then he said to me, I would wish that we don't go any further with this conversation. I thanked him. My mother was waiting around in the corner of that hotel in Clontarf. And I said, that guy is on the phone to Aer Lingus right now. In other words, and I believe when he said something like, you could be in trouble, this guy is not a bullshitter, this guy is facts down the line. A few months later, we went in, anytime I'd be going to Wales, I'd go to the Giants grave. That's what it's nicknamed, by the way, it's called the Giants grave by the local.
Which is?
The one you're talking about, Cairnarvon, yeah. It's like a big giant laid down in it.
Yeah.
The Giants
It
grave.
looks like it. Yeah.
Anyway, so I went into it one day with my mother. Now we were going back on the ferry at 7:30. I was dying to get down to Cannies to get me pints. It was a Sunday night, and we were getting the fast ferry. We get in at 9:30, get into Cannies by 10:30. You get 5 or 6 pints, depending on Nan's humour. But anyway, you missed that part. Depending on Nan's humour. Anyway. So it's 4 o'clock in the day. So we go in. Loads of time. Man doesn't like rush. We go in and we're going to look at the funeral or the cemetery and say hello to them, whatever. And the whole headstone is brand new. Everything is new. So I go around to a woman who's in the story. Her father was the mayor of Cairnarvon in 1952. Her name was Joan Davies. I went around to Joan's house. I said, Joan, we have to wrap this up quick, but I'll have to change the ferry if you don't sort this out for me. Someone's after putting up a brand new headstone. So she had a contact because of who her father was in the council or whatever it's called in Cairnarvon. And she rang and they said, we didn't know. And we've looked up our books. They got her this answer on a Sunday rapid. That's not ours. It's not in our books. So I went back to Cairnarvon Cemetery. There was 2 guys there. Don't ask me what they're doing, but it was definitely a Sunday. And I got chatting to them and I said, again, I didn't want them to think that I knew too much, so I basically pretended to be stupid and I said, there's a big massive grave down there. Is that like some giant laid down and died? And they said, no, that's a major Irish airline, and they had a big crash. Excuse me, it couldn't have been it was not a Sunday. It doesn't matter. But I was still racing to get back home on Friday to get a few pounds. In any event, I went to the cemetery and there was 2 workmen there, and they were lifting the rubbish, and so they weren't actually grave diggers, they were clearing away the rubbish, 2 councilmen. And I said to them, this big giant's grave over there, who died? Oh, that was a big Irish airliner, big Irish air crash about 100 years ago. And I said, it's fantastic. When the headstone is brand new, no one said that headstone's not new. That headstone is there since the accident nearly 100 years ago. I said, it can't be, it's glistening. They said, that was done up recently. I said, how recent? 2 months ago. And I said, who did it know? Because I'd like to be able to thank them, because my granduncle is in a complete lie. And the person said, they started talking to each other, oh, no, not that. And eventually they spat out a name, the little village, not the one I asked you about today. It's between Kilnarvan and Clanburris.
Clanvig.
And Rock.
Monumental.
And Rock.
Monumental places in Clanvig.
So myself and my mother now, I'm worried about the ferry, 7:30. It's now about 5:30, 4:45. So we're going to Clan Road. First place on the right, first probably business in the whole village is this. The wee girl is out having a cigarette break. I said, when I tell you, can you give me a hand? I said, I have a granduncle that's buried in a grave, and year after year firm is after doing it up, and I'd love to thank your boss. That'd be no problem, she says. But I said, who do I thank? Oh wait, like when? She comes up the computer. I said, sure, just swing the screen around for me. I memorised the whole screen instantly. It was gone out the door. Aer Lingus.
Wow.
Why? Because of the guy's house I had called into 2 months earlier. You've got shit coming down the tracks. What are you going to do? Damage limitation. Have you seen the state of the headstone in Carnarvon? We better get that cleaned up. That's my belief.
Yes.
I think
they cleaned the one on the mountain.
No, I don't think I got that. But they 100%. But the point I'm making is this: Aer Lingus own the headstone, and they own, and they're responsible for it. So if you want to get anything done, you're probably going to have to write to them.
No, that's okay. Okay, but could you put like a smaller headstone beside?
There's nothing to stop you doing that.
To say, well, can I suggest we have an amazing brain, younger than most of us here, as in Richard, who I would like to propose we put on to some sort of a subcommittee, because he's a historian, and no matter what we asked him last night, he pushed the buttons about our grandparents, mothers, fathers.
Richard,
and he
you have a new task.
a GoFundMe page. So a GoFundMe page.
Oh, no.
You want to say something?
I think that if you're going to ask Richard
If you would, Richard,
no.
No, what? Yes.
We should do it individually, everybody should do the donation.
Right, go on.
It's up to you if you'd like
Sorry,
to.
can I just say something, please? This project has been brought this far, thanks to Gavin, of course, and all the people who support.
Oh yeah, and Bill, my mother, a lot of great people there behind me, and I couldn't have done it without them.
But from where I'm listening now, it's coming to a new stage where more people need to be involved in bringing it into areas that concern them.
Well, I have to say this, I have only one goal left, just one goal, and that is to get the British government to go through my findings and sue me to hell if they want. But go through my findings and remove point 7 of the 1952 inquiry, which found that Captain James Richard Cuhan committed gross navigational errors and led the plane off course, which led it to being sucked down by a mountain wave. It never happened like that. The plane was horrifically on fire for several minutes, turned back, clipped a mountain, likely went on fire, and they went around 2 huge circles, agonizing circles, either in a lock with an aileron locked from the mountain collision, or desperately looking for a place to land. And then the wing exploded, and that's what people saw in the sky. They didn't see something down in the bowl explode. You cannot do that unless you're 1,641 feet tall.
Sorry, I'm not suggesting at all that you're not capable of doing that. I'm just suggesting that we should.
I won't have any time. I'd like Richard to do it.
So often on his own, and he takes a bus, a ferry, a train, a bus, and a taxi
Yeah, let
to get
Richard do
here.
it.
And he's a history teacher, he's very seriously interested in it. I think he might be interested in doing it for us all.
No, but I think you need to ask him first privately and not do it public.
Oh, no. Yeah, there is someone cleaning it, and I've identified 3 people it could be, and it's none of the 3.
Tracy mentioned something this morning, because I know you're close to certain sensitive situations, detail here now.
Yeah.
And you said to me, Tracy, will they fail in because of being there? Cleaning the plant.
Well, that's what I thought. I haven't, you know, that slate of the mountain has been cleaned by someone.
Who's registered?
For 27
Aer Lingus.
they see it as dirty. been done in the last 6 months.
It's been done literally last year.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there was a period for about 3 years during COVID where half it was done and half was not. So someone would have to clean half. And I've narrowed it down to what was not, but I don't know who it was.
David Ellis.
It's not David Ellis.
He said to me, like when we went up, that
He didn't clean, he might have cleaned it later, but he didn't clean it in the first clean that I
Oh,
saw.
sorry, no. But he did it last year. Yeah.
Yes.
He hasn't cleaned it, he said he hasn't.
He said he went up with his wife and they cleaned it like with bleach.
When was that?
Like this time last year when he took
Yeah,
me.
but Pete's got folks are here from February this year,
Yeah.
and it's dirty. And today it's like night and day, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's clean.
Okay.
I don't know. But I do know that it's awfully coincidental that when I went to this pilot's house, well, he pretty much asked me to get your stuff and get out without saying it that way. And it was within 2 months of that, the whole headstone, for the first time in 64 years, was gone. So that's just too coincidental.
So we just need to find somebody in Aer Lingus who we can get permission to get the next, say, an addition added onto the headstone.
But can I
Yes,
come in
please.
here? I'm just thinking about the orchestration of this, bringing more to the light of day. Gavin, you have been a mystery, astonishing me, in the way that you have been so doggedly determined to get to the bottom of this, and we're very grateful to you. But in some way, I understand that you have a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is phase one where you are involving us, who have, obviously emotional reasons, and we're tied up in the whole thing. Your phase two, I understand, is to go to the aviation people. Is that right? From what you're saying today? And then your phase three is when you're actually going to go public. And I think, I don't know when you plan to do that, or am I right in that?
No, I think phase 3 and 2 back to front. I think, and I have to talk with Anne about this, I think we'll go gung-ho on the Irish launch in the next 5 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, it's
And
at
go
that
public
stage,
at that point.
that stage when it's all over the papers. That seems to me that Aer Lingus at that stage would be an open door. So do you know what I mean? That I would usually play the colours.
Well, I have something beautifully, I shouldn't say we as a whole group have something beautifully in our favour. It is a fact that a captain and his passengers, and when I say his passengers, I should use the word occupants because there was 3 other crew on board. But it is a fact that the vast majority of the 23 people, no matter who came home, very little of them came home. I would say as much as 80 or 85% of all 23 passengers are in that mountaintop. So it is a simple fact that these people have been left in a foreign land, on a mountaintop, on their own, in an airplane, by a modern day Western carrier. It is unthinkable, it's unheard of that it would happen to them. And the reason they're in the mountain is to cover the true cause of the crash. And I document in here over the space of 4 pages who consigned them to the boat, they're named in it. Who signed off on it, who said it to remain there.
For the reasons we discussed coming down in the mud,
Yes.
It is much more understandable then, post-war, etc. And in history, how many people were lost, all that. That's, in a sense, it is awful, but it's to record it for posterity, that there should be something said.
Yes.
I'm just saying to copper fasten that point, and to me, the ignominy with which the powers that be within either English or Irish aviation jointly did what they did in 1953 when the inquiry, and 52 when the inquiry was going on. To copper fasten that, I remember the fact that the second half of the plane remained protruding from that bog for how many years?
For 28 years.
28 years. And I mean, that'd be unheard of today, that anyone would have a plane crash and leave the fuselage buried in the bog and the top half sticking up out of the ground and nobody cleaned the site.
And not only the hole on the tail was
debris, the fuselage stuck up out of the bog and was visible to anyone who climbed that mountain for that
And it was only John that.
It was
That's
John.
ignorant.
John that put his foot down and.
Yes,
wheeled
John
Yes,
Roberts was.
No, I'm just curious, like the people here whose fathers are up there, would ever occur to you to have the site excavated, to have them removed, or like nowadays, back in 1952 it probably mightn't have been as easy, like with pumps and whatever, but nowadays it might be a bit more possible with modern technology. Like, would you rather see your fathers stay there, or would you like to see them recovered and buried properly?
Gosh, that's an interesting question.
I know, it's one I've always been ready to be asked, so I'm glad you didn't ask me.
But also, I mean, like they'd be probably well preserved in a bog, like you know.
May the
Yes.
opposite effect, there's two different types, they can be done for nothing, be nothing.
Okay.
But the metal is in it, as you can see from today.
Yeah.
So it's the record that is important. The record is the truth, you know. Yeah.
This is true.
The
And to
truth
be
will
honest,
lie.
if Captain Jim Gohan's name is exonerated, and he was a war hero, and an Irish citizen, and he was claimed in the wrong, he's now exonerated, he deserves a formal national burial with
He
all the
does, and I'll
attributes
tell you something else I'd advocate.
of the,
Cork Airport has no name, he's a Cork boy, name Cork Airport after him. I know that sounds ostentatious, why not?
Why not?
Captain James Richard Keohane Airport, Cork International Airport, there's no name on it. He was a Cork boy who volunteered for a foreign country to fight the scourge of Nazism, and some of his air raids were daring. You read about him. I'm not the first to recognise him. He was recognised by an author called Andrew Bird in 2004 in his book, and he detailed one of the raids he carried out. A fantastic man. And his wife was 7 months pregnant with her fourth child, and she left Ireland that very week and never came back.
And she died very,
Well, I'm not going to get personal. It's very tragic from there on. Let's just leave it at that. So,
so he's been treated with complete
disdain, horrific. What was done to him of all? He was the worst of all, the treatments of all. You know,
Well, his name was tarnished,
Yeah.
he's the worst. I mean, that's
yes.
Just thinking about the circumstances about how the investigation was sidelined.
Yeah.
I've read a few books about the organisation of the British industry, if you like, in that time. And because BOAC and BEA were state-owned corporations, that puts a lot of emphasis on keeping them in business.
Of course.
From the government's point of view. To the point where they excluded private operators, largely.
Yes.
So the politics at the time, I'm wondering if the politics at the time of preferential treatment for those two airlines, which at one point looked like they'd become almost a British equivalent of Aeroflot, whether that might have assisted the...
Of course it had an effect on it. Of course it had. They could make things go away. The big names in the Irish government, like Sean Lemass, who was the Minister of Industry and Commerce, which was over transportation, and his name is on nothing. But then the clever guys don't leave fingerprints. But anything they wanted done, they had a guy under him called John Layton, who was one of the founders of Aer Lingus. He made the calls. If calls needed to be made, he made them. But when you're at that high level operating from intergovernment, calls don't need to be made. It's a given. You need this to go this way, you need that to go this way for that to fit that way, so that you're not paying up compensation. And it was done on a wink and a hood and not on a wink. Now there are several extraordinary, if I may use that, of my own collection of incriminating documents against both governments in there. And the president of the Irish Airline Pilots Association, who's been right behind me, not the current guy, the guy from 1974 who got Mrs. to on her pension, he said, put in everything you have, nail them. Because if you don't, they'll come after you. So everything's gone in there. All the documents there are validated. So I could not have made these documents up, or I'd have to have as well invented a time machine and got back to 52 to source them. And some of them are back into the 40s. Some of the pilots in Aer Lingus wrote to management and told them you're going to lose an airliner. And here's one of three. One guy wrote and he says you're going to lose it in one of three places. You're going to lose it in a 20-mile stretch going to Manchester from Amsterdam, because Aer Lingus had the Manchester routes. Or you're going to lose it going into Renfrew and Glasgow because of the Scottish Highlands. Or you're going to lose it in Sligo. That was put in writing to them. And they persisted. It was about cutbacks. They eliminated 34 radio operators, and the pilots had to fly without them. But they got their pension, so the pressure was on them. So when this went horribly wrong, it was a question of, no, I have no proof of this, and this is now doodly stuff. But I have no doubt that the pilots in question were sat down and told, Captain Keohane is gone, St. Kevin is gone, we cannot bring them back. If you don't play ball, the airline is gone. I have no doubt a conversation along those lines took place. And if you read that the guys flying on that night, behind them before Keohane, if you read the evidence they gave in Volume 2, Chapters Evening 3, if you read the evidence they give, they're very reluctant to give evidence, because whichever way they give their evidence, they're either going to hang the airline or they're going to hang their deceased comrade. So they're walking a very tight line all the time with their answers. And in some cases they have to tell downright lies. And those lies are detailed in a section there, in this, an entire chapter called Dead Men Tell No Tales. And you'll see where they say one thing and it makes no mathematical sense in terms of speed versus distance and stuff like that. So, any other questions?
What do you think caused the explosion? Was it the cliff in the mountain?
I don't know. It was either a clip in the mountain. The problem we have with the clip in the mountain is, and Home will validate this one. It's a very unusual problem that I have to make that claim. Is that two planes, another plane physically absolutely crashed there and ended up down in there. The Mosquito. And the Mosquito gear and the DC-3 gear are almost identical. Now the gear was found at the, and where's the
It's a 1948 crash, isn't it?
no, but where was the Ken McCoy find?
Cookstown by the Wollongong.
Okay, a man, an RAF man with your father, coming down on a summery day, saw something glistening like you did when you found the piece of St. Kenneth, and the other guy said to him, but don't worry about it. He said, no, I have to investigate it. And he let the moor wait, and he went down into the stream, and he found he found an entire hydraulic gear. And there was a serial number that he was able to take off it. And he brought it out to RAF Valley, and they came back to him 3 days later and said, that's off an Irish airliner that crashed last year. The inquiry's over, we'll forget about it. So that's what gave us the theory. Now I was lucky to interview that man in person, and he told me he wanted it off his conscience before he died, that he never followed up his people telling him to forget about it. He felt bad about it. But the problem I have there that I have to say the word likely, Richard, is because of this other Mosquito gear. So unless we were able to go down into that and unearth an awful weight in the gear of the plane, I can't make that claim.
Do the
But what we
numbers
do know
not
is that,
qualify?
huh?
Do the numbers not qualify as the same kind?
Oh, look who's after coming in. Gwyn Ross Jones. Hello, Gwyn Ross.
Hello, Gwen. Good to see you.
Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you.
You're all right.
Gwyn Ross Jones lived on the other side of the mountain, and he audibly witnessed the aircraft in distress. He also had the uniqueness of going up to the crash site at 14 years of age on the Sunday after the crash, and he saw the last body being retrieved. He was been told, "Sean, go away," and one of the RAF men, who knows, it might have been your father, Karen, but one of the RAF men said, "What harm is he? Leave him and stay back." And he said you said that when they exhumed it, they showed such great respect. And that's Gwyn Ross. Great guy.
Sorry, I'm a bit deaf. But
That's okay.
I haven't been able to go up a sheet in the last couple of years.
Okay.
I broke my back.
Gwyn Ross goes up and talks to them.
That's good.
We were up there today. It was horrific. Horrific.
Rain, all the way there, rain.
Mud everywhere, slipping and sliding.
Sorry? Yes?
Now I wanted, just while we're on the subject, I want to tell you something about Gwyn Ross, and this is in the story. In 1955, Gwyn Ross was up fox hunting when he was 17, so it's 3 years later. Gwyn Ross was up in 55 as a 17-year-old fox hunting. And he saw a group of people there at the crash site. And he went over to talk to them. And one of them was the captain's widow. And she got very upset. And when she asked Gwyn Ross, did he know anything? Now you're in this story. Did he know anything of it? And Gwyn Ross told her that the plane had gone around in 2 huge circles. And the woman, 2 or 3 big circles, and the woman, Mrs. Cuhan, got very upset and asked him, how sure are you? And he said, everybody knows this. And she went down into the village that day and started, not the village, but Nankwanat in the area, and started knocking on doors and asking questions. She got the same answers. She was completely distraught. She then knew that everything that had been told at the inquiry was hogwash. Everything, the whole thing was a sham. And that's detailed in the story. She just became very distraught over it. So. And she confronted the manager of Innings at the time, and he basically said along the lines, we did what we had to do. the end justifies the means.
Oh, she got 65.
No, she got 48 pounds.
48
And that was just the
I
month's
wanna-
wage.
months of age.
That was the month's wage that he was owed.
Should have got. Yeah, that's the statutory entitlement.
And how many children did
She had 3 and 1 on the way.
On the way.
Are they still around? Or?
3 and 4 are around, yes. No.
There were the nephews, wasn't it nephews for instance?
The nephew,
2 nephews for
Yes,
Sligo.
So that's about it, guys. It's been a 12-year, 3-month struggle, but we did it, and we're at the end of the trail, as to say. The journey has ended. This part of the journey is over. And it's up to people. I don't want anyone to accept what I'm saying as fact. I'd like you to go through it. If any of you are technically minded, I'd like you to read the deconstruction of the British government's inquiry, and I welcome anyone that can improve it. I'm not saying I know everything. I'm only 97% happy I'm right. Well, that means 1952 guys are 97% wrong. And it also means I'm missing that little tiny bit of proof. But I'm 100% happy in most of what I'm claiming. There's just little parts I could not fine tune. I cannot tell you exactly where it turned back, but I can tell you where it didn't turn back. I know it got 4 degrees west. And we know that from backtracking from the witness statements. It's actually easy peasy mathematics. And we know that she exploded in the air, and again, that's covered in a section called the Land of the Giants. And we know that when you just twisting over a trigonometry on its side or a triangle on its side. So a lot of it is very straightforward stuff. How they thought that they could get away with it, but they did, and they got away with it for 72 years almost.
Without you, they would have got away with it.
For all eternity. For all eternity. We did it. And if nobody believes me, I really, frankly, don't care. But I do intend to present this to the Irish Airline Pilots Association, today's Irish Airline Pilots Association. Given that the 3 pilots on board, one was deadheading, but a senior captain in Aer Lingus, given that they were all valid, paid up members of their organisation, let's see what they have to say about it. Let's see what they have to do about it.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Let's see, will the interest of the dollar again outweigh the interest of humanity? Let's see will it come to that. And as I say, I will not stop until I get point 7 removed from the British government inquiry.
Oh, brilliant.
So,
Good. Well done.
and I'd like to say to everyone here, and everyone else who has helped me, and there's been a lot of people behind the scenes, particularly my mother, and Bill Good, Bowen, and if I leave anybody out, please,
Tracy and
Debs, of course, and
and all the witnesses of all the families,
Yeah.
everybody basically.
yeah, and Gwynant, of course, and Gwyn Ross. Gwynant actually witnessed the plane on fire. I just think about that. In flight, a big arc across the sky, her and her sister. They witnessed it, and it has tormented her ever since. And I know, and I wish to publicly apologise to you for disbelieving you. But you have to remember, I had to work off the fact that memories from people 60 plus years later can change, and things can have happened in between. And I basically am so anti-conspiratorialist that I had to rule out everything before I could rule anything in. And I do apologise to you for what you saw. You 100% saw. Apology taken? Accepted?
Yes.
You should keep throwing up me, you didn't believe me.
You haven't mentioned an important detail. In what bookshops is this wonderful volume available, and what's the price?
It's available in Liber Bookshop in Sligo.
I'm joking. What's the price now?
£30.
Is that all for twice the cost?
Oh, I have to say this, excuse me, no, I have to say this, no, £30 is what it is. I forgot to say this. We could not get the hardback edition in time. It's a lovely cover. I'm very happy with it myself. There will be a hardback edition. I can't say when, but there's a softback edition now, and that's 30. The hardback will probably be 40,
Yes.
45 minutes. £30 it is today. £30 sterling.
So we can queue up and buy it now.
I hope so.
Yep.
I have to get some of the 450,000 euros gone into this project back. I did it honestly. I want to say this. I never ever did this for fame or fortune. It has cost me, and my mother may not like to hear this, it could potentially have cost me my inheritance, my share of my inheritance. I don't care. It was never about fame or fortune to me. It was never about money. It was about telling the people's lives, and October 5th, 2012, that changed into vindicating Captain Johansson.
Yes.
There is one other part of the story you will have to read. Aer Lingus saw me coming in 2012, and it cost them a sizable amount of money, all done at an accountancy level. And when I say a considerable amount of money, I'm talking a lot of millions to move something about it. No, it's in the book. It's in a chapter called.
It's so good.
It's in a chapter called Quadruplicate Self-Named Interest. Read that and you'll get it all. It's only 2 paragraphs, less is more. And you can see how they pulled off a stroke of a pen.
Round off the night, which is brilliant.
Brilliant.
Well, they did it.
No, your mum says no.
Well, no, it was done in such a way that they have a back. I'll tell it to you I'll tell it to any of you in private, but I'm not going to go in public with a camera and say it. I'll tell it to any of you in private. It's a 100% fact. But the reason I won't go public with it yet, Anne, is because they used some other term for how they got rid of it.
Okay, all right. Well done, Gavin.
A big thank you, Gavin.
Last thing, excuse me. Bill wants it known that he's buying the drinks at the meal tonight. So.